The stillness of the Michigan night was absolute, a profound quiet where the only sound was the whisper of falling snow. A relentless blizzard had descended upon the outskirts of Detroit, burying the world in a blanket of pure, unforgiving white. In a small, weathered cabin nestled among the skeletal trees, Marcus Vance, a man whose shoulders carried the weight of both a Marine past and a broken present, sat vigil by a faltering fire. His daughter Zoe was a small, still form on the threadbare sofa, her small fingers curled around the matted fur of a teddy bear named Captain Patches. The room was bathed in a weak, flickering light, and the air held a biting chill that the dying embers could no longer fight. The last of their firewood was surrendering to ash. Marcus stared into the fading glow, his gaze distant, lost not to exhaustion, but to the ghosts of a life that felt like someone else's. He had once been a creator, a man who spoke the language of steel and chrome, running a modest workshop where he brought motorcycles to life. His pride was forged in the heat of the welding torch, but a cascade of misfortune, a failed business, the loss of his wife, the stripping away of every pillar that held him up, had left him with nothing but this drafty cabin and the crushing silence that now filled his days. Outside, the storm raged with renewed ferocity. The wind shrieked through the chinks in the cabin's walls, a mournful sound that made the windows rattle in their frames. The roof above groaned under the accumulating weight of the snow, a low, ominous protest with each passing moment. Marcus rose, his movements stiff from the cold, and gently adjusted the thin blanket over his daughter. He pulled it up to her chin, his large, calloused hands gentle. He moved to the window, peering out into the swirling vortex of white, half expecting the world to have vanished completely. It was then that he saw them, a pair of lights piercing the dense curtain of snow, then another pair, and another, until the winding access road below his property was illuminated by a chain of brilliant orbs, like a fallen constellation. The deep guttural rumble that vibrated through the floorboards was not the sound of thunder. It was the unmistakable, synchronized roar of motorcycle engines. If you believe that kindness can be a beacon in the darkest of storms, that everyone deserves a second chance, and that helping a stranger is the highest form of humanity, then we invite you to join our community. Like, comment, and share this story, and subscribe for more tales of hope. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from, because your support helps us keep these narratives of compassion alive. Marcus pulled on his worn-out coat and stepped onto the porch, the fresh powder immediately swallowing his boots to his ankles. He cinched the jacket tighter against the biting wind as the engine noise intensified, a symphony of raw power against the storm's fury. Out of the white chaos they emerged, a column of 20 motorcycles, their headlights cutting through the blizzard like beacons in a frozen sea. At the head of the formation rode a woman who seemed carved from the storm itself, tall, poised, her presence radiating a quiet confidence. Her eyes, visible even from a distance, held a depth that spoke of countless miles and untold stories. This was Roxanne Vega, the formidable CEO of a major motorcycle accessories empire, and the leader of an all-female riding crew known as the Harbingers. They were a sisterhood forged on the asphalt, veterans, survivors, rebels, and visionaries who rode not just for freedom, but for a cause. The bikes came to a halt in a perfect line before Marcus's small cabin, their engines idling down to a respectful purr. The riders' gear was caked in a layer of ice and snow. Roxanne dismounted, her movements fluid and sure. She removed her helmet, shaking loose a cascade of dark hair, and took a deep, steadying breath. Her voice, when she spoke, was surprisingly soft, yet it carried an unwavering strength that cut through the wind. "We need shelter, please." Marcus looked past her at the 19 other women, their faces etched with cold and exhaustion, shivering in the relentless blizzard. His own hearth was nearly dead, his pantry was perilously bare, and the roof had developed a new leak that afternoon. Yet, a fundamental part of his being, the part that was a father, a Marine, and simply a man, could not refuse. He stepped back, opening the door as wide as it would go. "Come in," he said, his voice a low murmur against the storm. In a matter of minutes, the desolate cabin was transformed. The small, cold space, once a vessel of solitude, became a haven of warmth and life. The harbingers shed their heavy, wet gear, hanging jackets and leathers near the fireplace, their collective energies seeming to coax the dying embers back to life. Laughter and spirited conversation filled the void that had long been occupied by silence. The rich aroma of hot coffee and hearty soup, poured from insulated flasks they carried, mingled with the nostalgic scent of pine wood as some of the women produced a small bundle of emergency firewood from their saddlebags. Zoe woke from the gentle commotion, her eyes wide with wonder as she stared at the assembly of strong, smiling women who filled her home. They looked at her with such kindness, as if she were a long-lost little sister. One of the riders, a woman with a warm, round face, knelt down and offered her a steaming mug of hot cocoa. A genuine, unrestrained giggle escaped Zoe's lips for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Marcus stood back, a silent observer in the corner of his own home, watching the scene unfold with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Roxanne, with an almost preternatural awareness, noticed his quiet detachment. She saw the rigid discipline in his posture, the economy of his movements, the way his eyes constantly scanned the room, assessing, protecting. It was a language she understood intimately. "You've seen service, haven't you?" she asked, her voice low and respectful, not a question but a statement of fact. Marcus gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Marine Corps," he confirmed, the words feeling foreign on his tongue after so long. A faint, knowing smile touched Roxanne's lips. "Then you understand," she said softly, "what it means to stand a post, to protect others even when you feel like you have nothing left to give." That night, as the blizzard howled its fury against the small cabin, a different kind of warmth bloomed within its walls. It wasn't just the revitalized fire, it was the glow of shared humanity, of strangers finding common ground in a storm. The women, resourceful and pragmatic, used spare tarps and gear from their bikes to patch the leak in the roof and insulate a rattling window frame. They shared stories from their journeys, tales of roads that stretched into horizons, of communities they had helped, of personal battles fought and won to reclaim their destinies from hardship. Marcus, who had grown so accustomed to the weight of his own solitude that he'd forgotten the feel of companionship, listened intently. He found himself absorbing their strength, their resilience, their unwavering optimism. A genuine smile would occasionally soften the hard lines of his face when their laughter filled the room, a sound that was as healing as it was welcome. When morning finally broke, the storm had exhausted itself. The world outside was transformed into a pristine, glistening landscape of white. The silence now one of peace rather than desolation. The harbingers began to pack their gear, their movements efficient and respectful as they cleaned the small space, leaving it better than they had found it. But Roxanne lingered behind. She found Marcus outside, standing motionless, his gaze fixed on the snow-draped skeleton of his old workshop next to the cabin. It was a monument to his former life, the place where he had once been a master of his craft before bankruptcy had shattered his world. "You built bikes in there?" she asked, her tone gentle. Marcus nodded, a flicker of old pride and fresh pain in his eyes. "I used to," he said, his voice thick with memory, before it all came apart. Roxanne looked from the dilapidated structure to the man standing beside her, seeing not the ruin, but the foundation. She offered a knowing smile. "Well," she said, her voice filled with a quiet conviction, "maybe it's time to build it all back up again." Exactly 1 week later, a familiar thunder echoed down the cleared access road, a sound that now sparked not confusion, but a flicker of impossible hope in Marcus's chest. The resonant roar of 20 powerful engines announced the return of the harbingers. Roxanne Vega was at the front, but this time, they were not alone. Following their impressive formation were 3 large, commercial trucks, each emblazoned with the sleek logo of Vega Moto Gear. Marcus stepped out onto his porch, his heart pounding with a mixture of disbelief and anticipation. Roxanne dismounted and walked toward him, a large manila envelope in her hand. "You gave us a safe harbor when you had next to nothing," she said, her eyes meeting his with unwavering sincerity. "Now it's our turn to give you one." She handed him the envelope. Inside, his trembling fingers found a set of official partnership documents and a handwritten letter. The truck's rear doors rolled open, revealing a treasure trove of tools and equipment, hydraulic lifts, state-of-the-art welding stations, and gleaming chests filled with every wrench and socket a mechanic could dream of. With the combined force of the Harbingers and a crew of local volunteers Roxanne had organized, the resurrection of Marcus's workshop began. The dilapidated building was stripped down to its strong bones and reborn. Walls were reinforced, a new roof was installed, and the interior was transformed into a professional-grade garage. A new hand-painted sign was hung above the wide bay doors, Zoe's Ride. It was more than just a repair shop. It became a sanctuary. It was a place for people like Marcus, people who had been knocked down by life and were looking for a chance to get back up. Veterans struggling to reintegrate, widows seeking a new trade, and single parents needing a stable income found a home there. They came to learn, to work, and to piece their lives back together, bolt by bolt. Roxanne formalized her partnership with Marcus, placing him at the helm of a new division within her company, a special restoration project dedicated to providing employment and skills training to veterans in need. Within a few short months, the cabin that had once been a vessel of silence and sorrow was now the heart of a vibrant community, constantly buzzing with the sounds of life, the roar of engines, the rhythm of tools, the flow of music, and the warmth of easy laughter. The Michigan snows still fell each winter, but for Marcus and Zoe, they no longer symbolized isolation and despair. Instead, they were a beautiful reminder of the night that hope came riding through a storm. Years passed. At a grand charity gala for the Harbinger Foundation, an organization Roxanne had established to help communities in crisis, Marcus Vance stood on a brightly lit stage beside her. His daughter Zoe, now a bright and confident teenager, watched from the front row, her eyes shining with pride. Marcus leaned into the microphone, his voice steady but thick with emotion as he addressed the packed ballroom. That night during the blizzard, I was sure the world had forgotten about me and my little girl, he began, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. But I was wrong. It hadn't forgotten. It just sent its angels on motorcycles, riding through the snow. A wave of applause rose from the audience, a standing ovation that filled the vast hall. Roxanne smiled, a humble, genuine expression, a glint of moisture in her eyes. She knew this was more than a story of one man's survival. It was a testament to the profound power of human connection, of kindness in its most unadulterated form. If this story has moved you, if it has touched a place in your heart, we ask you to please like, comment, and share it with others. Your subscription and support are what allow these chronicles of kindness to be told. Perhaps by sharing it, someone out there will be inspired to open their own door to a stranger in a storm. And before we conclude, we want to ask you a question in the comments below. Do you truly believe that a single act of kindness has the power to completely rewrite a person's destiny? Because as this story shows, sometimes all it takes is one knock on a door, one raging storm, and one simple, courageous yes to change absolutely everything.